Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker. Growing up, Dr. Helen McIntosh shared few loving moments with her mother. Her mother battled anxiety, anger, and alcoholism, while Helen struggled to fend off her verbal and emotional abuse. After Helen became a doctor of counseling psychology, she helped other women scarred from toxic mother-daughter relationships. Once her own daughter, Blythe, grew up and left home, Helen longed to maintain a good relationship with her. Today, Helen and Blythe, who is a mother of two daughters, have a close and healthy mother-daughter bond achieved through effort and repairs. In their new book, Mended, Restoring the Hearts of Mothers and Daughters, they share how they've built, guarded, and renewed a relationship centered around talking, respecting, and listening. No mom or daughter wants to walk a dark path of uncertainty, a strained relationship, or a gulf between you that feels too difficult for you to cross, says Blythe, knowing how common unstable and unfinished relationships are. The book Mended walks readers through the steps to reconciliation and includes specific conversations that guide mothers and daughters towards openness, grace-filled confrontation, and restoration. Blythe Daniel is a literary agent and marketer with 20-plus years of experience in publishing. She's written for Christian retailing and focused on the family, and she links bloggers with readers through Blogabout. The daughter of Dr. Helen McIntosh, she lives in Colorado with her husband and three children. Dr. Helen McIntosh, who has her doctorate in education and counseling psychology, is a counselor, speaker, educator, and author of Messages to Myself and Eric, Jose, and the Peace Rug. Her work has appeared in Guidepost, Parent Life, and Home Life magazine. She resides in Georgia with her husband, Jim. They have two children and 5 grandchildren. Joining us now to talk about their new book, Mended, Restoring the Hearts of Mothers and Daughters, are Blythe Daniel and Dr. Helen McIntosh. Blythe and Helen, welcome to Revealing the Truth.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you so much. We're excited to be with you.
Well, we're excited to have you. Blythe, you and I have worked together. I've interviewed your authors since we launched this new network in January of 2017. We've had the pleasure of working together, and it's been a joy to work with you and to see how you operate, and your probative questions to me about what was I going to do with my life and my career at this point in time. And I kind of sent you a little blurb to say, hey, take a look at this. I've got an idea. I just don't have time. That's
Yes.
my real issue. But it's a joy to meet your mother, because oftentimes you find that with the right amount of nurturing, there is a great deal of insight into a mother through her daughter, not always through the son, but you can see a reflection in that parenting model. We often look at it by saying that, well, I'll never say that to my children, or I'll never be like my mother, when we find ourselves exactly in that place where we are exactly like our mothers and our fathers. But one of the most stunning parts of this whole journey that I want to take with you is, Helen, you, in a season where women did not rise to the level that you rose in education and in practice, found your own healing through your own education, and then turned your own healing journey into your vocation, which really is, anybody who deals in counseling is in ministry, whether they recognize it as quote-unquote ministry or not.
Yes,
So,
it's true.
so you kind of broke the mold of an era where women, it was unusual, it was uncommon. What was the model for you? You had this anxiety, anger, alcoholic mother. Certainly college seemed like a great place to escape to. But what was really the driving factor, and where did you get your faith lessons in that home?
Thanks so much, Eric, for this invitation to share. You know, what was my determination to change the pattern was the sheer fright of thinking that Blythe would have to live through the same nightmare that I did. So that's not a very healthy term, but it led me to the steps to take to be a healthier person, to be, for us to not be as dysfunctional as we could have been. And it was, boy, when Blythe and I share with people what the name of our book is, there is a melting in their heart. And we have heard hundreds and hundreds of mother wound stories. And I think I didn't know to call it that at the time, but there was something in me that rose up. And that was about the time I became a believer. And so God poured in a lot of healthy concepts at that time. Then I was doing some studying, and it has been such a privilege to help people with their wounds, really.
You know, it's so interesting.
It's been an honor.
It's so interesting that I had this conversation just yesterday with somebody who ministers to women, and we talked about the passage in James that says true religion is taking care of the widows and the orphans. And I said, you know, we always look at that as a natural widow, a natural orphan, but I'm going to take a little bit different approach and say we need to be dealing with the orphan spirit and with the widow spirit,
Yes.
which is the spirit of unloved, uncared for, unwanted, unnurtured, unneeded,
Yes.
unnecessary, unforgivable. It's a damaged spirit, and it's a wound, it's a spiritual wound, a soulish wound that has to be mended. It has to be stitched back together, but it has to be done in a way where it heals from the inside in a slow process so that it
Yes.
stays healed, where we might have a scar but no pain associated when we touch it.
You have said it well.
That's a very important part. So you got your motivation. Listen, I make no apology that maybe the greatest lessons I ever learned were through bad experience. And the best education I ever got was negatively motivated to find a way out of something, was where I garnered more education during the escape route than I did to get into the place or the problem, the bind that I got myself into.
True.
So there's a lot of wisdom when we learn from motivation, whether we would call it positive or negative motivation. They both stimulate the same thing. So Blythe, when you know and you heard your mother's stories, you began to get to know your mother as a person, which there is a place you arrive at where they move into a person. They become a person to you. And you begin to inquire and you wonder and you are able to have that safe place to ask those kind of questions. What was it that you learned about your mother that helped you in your faith journey to find a relationship that would bring you closer to the Lord, and ultimately would then drive you to understand concepts like reconciliation and forgiveness and restoration and grace at the most intimate level, which is mother-daughter, is almost even more intimate at times than husband-wife, because this is the image bearer of the mother, and we are image bearers of God. So you have this dual image conflict going on that's really quite extraordinary. So
You're right.
How was that for you, Blythe?
What I learned was really truthfully that my mom was gaining her strength from her relationship with the Lord. And it showed me that she was a real person, as you said, Eric, but she wasn't just acting out of her own upbringing. She was only able to mother me because of what God had restored to her through a relationship in Jesus Christ. We only get that by studying His Word and having prayer with the Lord over things in our hearts and knowing what His Word says to us. I know you're a big believer in the Word. And so I learned that my mom was gaining her strength from a source greater than herself. And I looked at that as the source for my faith. I knew that her faith was genuine because it had to be. She had lived through so much that I witnessed as a young girl. I watched her mom get angry with her. And I knew that my mom's faith was genuine. I knew I could trust her faith because it wasn't something that she had lived her whole life. It wasn't something she made up. It was something that she had received. And so I could trust that. And I grew up in a very loving home. And I knew that that God as the source of love, I saw it modeled well. And some people do not see it modeled well. I had that extra gift of being able to recognize God for who he is based on how my mom had received him and my dad and how they lived him out day by day. And so that really encouraged me and inspired me and still does to this day. She's such a strong woman. She's persevered through so much, even in writing this book. She has weathered a lot of health journeys. And so I still see her faith as strong as it is today, if not even stronger than when it was when I was growing up.
Well, there's something that we forget about, and that is honor, respect, the fifth commandment, not discussed in many circles, honor your mother and father, and your life will be blessed for that. There's quite an extraordinary blessing that goes with that, with long life and a blessing. But because we have this rather interesting new dynamic of fatherlessness, absentee mothers because they have to work 2 and 3 jobs in order to take care of a family, that relationships are becoming strained, and then you reach a point where independence becomes a difficult transition for both the parent, who's now we used to call it cutting the apron strings, but really who's responsible for cutting the apron strings? Is the child responsible to take authority and take dominion and make decisions, or is it a cooperative effort, or is it the mother that says, I really need to release this child? Is this a point of contention? Is there a new kind of enabling that goes on where parents' identities are so wrapped up in their children that they're afraid to let them go, or they will be lost without it?
We sure are seeing a lot of different models, aren't we? We really are. But we also see a lot of patterns that need to be broken and changed. And I think that's what Blythe and I said collectively. We knew that we wanted to break the old patterns and start some new ones.
And I really do think that it can go either way, Eric, as far as whose responsibility is that to give the independence. When I was going off to college, my mom said to me, Blythe, what I want is a good relationship with you to continue. And so if I say something that feels like control, I need you to say, Mom, that feels like control. And yet there's times that just through my actions, that I was really showing I needed independence, and maybe Mom didn't pick up on that enough. So in that situation, I could have said, Mom, I feel like I need to be free of this, or I need to have some more independence. Will you allow that? Will you give me that? So I think that it can be either way. I don't feel like it always has to be the mom giving it towards the daughter. I feel like, or a son even. But in our day and age, I feel like we need to be honest with each other and respectful, as you had said, Eric. But we think that it can work both ways.
When did this pattern of communication develop? Was this an early on, Helen? Were you very intentional in communicating with your daughter at a level when she was certain age appropriate, but nevertheless was
I would say
moving her forward to a higher standard than just the basic activities and the basic level of communication? Were you a strong communicator?
Words do mean a lot to me, and I guess that's why they were so hurtful when my mom was so abusive. But yes, early on, Blythe and her brother were probably 5 and 6 years old when we started saying how important it was to give each other forgiveness. And I taught them early on how to ask for forgiveness with each other to clear things up. So words have meant a lot.
Was there ever a time during your relationship where you hit the point where there was something that was severely broken?
Yes, yes. I can remember weeping on the floor during Blythe was off at college, and I probably didn't ever tell you, but things were still so difficult with my mom from the time Blythe was very young until um, after their college years. So God has been chiseling away for years and years, but what I learned is that I did all that God showed me to do with my mom. She didn't perform the way I wish that she had, but the good news is that I became okay, and I was okay no matter what. Um,
So,
I He restored me.
is much of this work that you two did together a collaborative effort to talk about how your experience with your mother was able to be mended, even though it wasn't mended on both sides equally, but that it
Right.
was mended because of this act of forgiveness, this willingness on your part that even if she didn't say, I'm sorry, that you were going to walk with this attitude of forgiveness, and you saw that it mended something in you. This isn't so much about mending between you and Blythe, but really looking at what worked with you and the model that you set that wound up bringing tremendous healing to you, that you can come out of brokenness and be mended, and it's not dependent upon the other person. Is that more of the focus of the story that you're telling?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, um, we've not discussed this ever, but the word mended in Scripture is the same use as the fishnets when they were mended, and it means for able to be used. And so our mended story with Mom, I was able to be used because of that.
And we have had areas in our relationship that we've needed to address. For instance, when I became a new mom, um, mom gave me some input that I wasn't ready to hear, didn't really want to hear. And I think looking back on it, we would both say maybe wasn't the best delivery or the best timing. And so we had to work that through. But because we had built a relationship prior to that, we could work it through. Now we took some space and some time in order to do that, but I think what we're saying is that no matter where you are in your relationship with a family member, there can be healing, and it might not always come on the terms that we think or in the timing that we think, but as you said, Eric, we always can be restored in our hearts, and it may occur with that person. We pray that it does, but there have been things that we've had to look at in our relationship. No relationship is perfect, is it? And there are deeper levels of healing, I believe, is what we would say to that.
Blythe, what was your relationship with your grandmother? Seeing how she treated your mother, there's that affinity for your mom, but you're not really sure about divided loyalties, and you want to love your grandmother, but you don't maybe like her, or maybe you didn't really have that kind of relationship, and it was a very special relationship, and it was different. She was like a different person, almost like bipolar. That when she dealt with your mom, she was a one schizophrenic. She was one person when she dealt with your mother, and when she dealt with you and your brother, she was a completely different person. She was grandma, and it was like the Wicked Witch of the North and the I'm sorry a house fell on your sister kind of scenario.
That's a great question, and I think that my relationship with my grandmother was a good relationship. I felt love from her, but at the same time, it was hard to connect as a child that she could be so loving towards me, and yet I could be in the same room with her, and she would be so verbally assaulting my mom. And I do remember speaking up as a child and telling her, no, you will not speak to my mom that way. And I remember feeling sadness that my mom did have to hear these verbal assaults. there were a few times where I did see her. I mean, more than a few times, but there were times that I did see her lose her temper around me. It didn't feel personal to me as much as I'm sure it felt personal to mom. The direct lineage between a mom and a daughter, that feels more personal, I think, than grandmother to granddaughter. But one thing that mom has said before, and I think it's so true, is that when a person maybe is full of rage or anger or whatever their struggle is, they aren't typically the person that they want to be. And I think that my grandmother wasn't who she wanted to be with my mom. And I think maybe with me, she felt like she could have another chance to be the kind of loving mother, albeit grandmother, in my life. And so, yes, I did feel her love, but I also felt the tension at times that her choices had brought into our family relationship. And that was hard to grow up under.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Helen, did that bring a little bit of conflict to you to see a side of your mother which was being exhibited to your daughter but was not ever exhibited to you?
Eric, I was probably grateful that she could show Blythe that love. I remember being grateful. I had already known cognitively that anger is a signal that something's not right in your world. And so I knew Mom's battles were personal, but they felt personal when I became the whipping post. But I studied a lot about dysfunction, and I could see the pattern. I just was busy trying to not make it personal.
Yeah.
So did you find yourself motivated by avoidance, conflict avoidance, more than relationship development?
I remember just having a sort of a survivor's prayer. Just, Lord, help me, help me, help me. There was a part of me that I remember thinking I'd love to help others. And I think this is one of the reasons that we've put in dozens of conversations in the book for people to be able to talk to volcanoes like my mom and other personalities.
Yeah, I can tell you that was the relationship with my father and myself, which was why I wound up leaving at 14 and never returning. But it wasn't until I went into ministry, left the corporate world and went into ministry, that I really understood anything about any of that. It was just I wanted to be as far as I possibly could be from that environment, and so I used the tools that God gave me. I grew up in a traditional Jewish home, so there wasn't anything about the Messiah in that. I didn't come to faith till I was 44. But I did have the years after that where I did have this strong admonition from the Lord that I am to be a forgiver, and I am to bless those that curse me and pray for those that despitefully use me, and I'm to esteem the other more than myself, and I'm to honor and respect all, and that there should be no unwholesome talk that comes from my mouth, but only just for the encouragement of the other. And so I wound up preaching my father's funeral. I was the least likely person in the world, and my mother came to me and said, I want you to preach your father's funeral. And I said, I'm the least qualified to edify in a eulogy. I don't know that I have anything nice to say. And so she said, I know you will find what it is you need to say. And there was a wonderful turnout, and the message was very well received, and it was honest, but it was loving, and it was very, very carefully worded as really a love letter from my father to my two sisters and to my mother, and to his friends, was really the way it was presented, as opposed to a relational type of message. We're talking with mother-daughter combination Blythe Daniel and Helen McIntosh, authors of the new book Mended, Restoring the Hearts of Mothers and daughters, a personal story of reconciliation, a personal story of how to facilitate in your own life, in your own heart, in your own damaged relationships, the process of healing. Where to begin, where to stay and dwell for seasons as you inventory and look at where you are and the relationships, and are they really what you want them to be? And if they're not, then the responsibility for all of us is, Lord, let there be change, but let it begin with me. And this is a book that's going to help you take the first step towards mending those broken relationships. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to continue in our conversation about Mended, Restoring the Hearts of Mothers and Daughters with Blythe Daniel and Dr. Helen McIntosh. We'll be right back. Not everything that makes the headlines has biblical importance, but many events that happen around the world do, and you never hear about them. Igniting a Nation is pleased to teach Revealing Prophecy every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. at the Marriott 280 in Birmingham. We will cover worldwide events and insider information that will connect the dots of what's happening around the world with biblical prophecy. If you happen to miss a class, we'll televise each week's class at 10 o'clock Central Time on ignitinganation.com and all our social media outlets. Copies of the teachings will also be available to purchase on our website at www.ignitinganation.com. The Lord meets you right where you are, and so does Igniting a Nation's new live streaming outlets. You can now watch Revealing the Truth, Revealing the Bible, and Prophecy Revealed simulcast live each Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 1 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on YouTube Live, Facebook Live, Vimeo, Periscope, and through our website, www.ignitinganation.com. No matter what device you are using, our program will automatically scale so you won't have to miss a single program. And if you happen to miss an episode, you can always subscribe to the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel and access over 1,000 interviews and never miss your favorite authors, special guests, and topics that interest you the most.
There are lots of ways to see Israel, but nothing compares to seeing the land of the book and the people of the book through the eyes of two Jewish believers who can take you on a journey that will bring the entire Bible to life. When you join Rabbi Eric Walker and his #1 rated tour guide, Edo Canaan, in Israel, you'll experience incredible teachings, first-class accommodations, and actually walk where Jesus walked. You will experience the Bible transforming from black and white into living color, and you will never see the Bible in the same way again. For more information, visit us at www.ignitinganation.com/events.
The Lord contends with what contends with you, and Igniting a Nation is committed to bringing to light each and every issue that faces a believer's life. Our live stream programming and teachings take you on a journey to finding biblical truth from a wide variety of experts who share their insights into a deeper walk with the Lord. We have assembled the most comprehensive panel of experts in the fields of prophecy, caregiving, healing from trauma, shame, and abuse, and so much more. We continue to expand our teachings and programming to meet your needs. We're committed to healing the nations with biblical truth. Visit www.ignitinganation.com to develop a deeper walk with the Lord and start your journey to a transformed life. The Bible commands us to study to show ourselves approved, but most study using Bible study tools and not actually studying the Bible chapter and verse. Igniting a Nation is pleased to present Revealing the Bible, recorded and taught each week before a live audience. We take you deeper into the actual Bible and verse in both Hebrew and English and connect the dots between the Old and New Testament. You can attend our 2 classes in Tuscaloosa and Birmingham, or watch the program every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central Time on ignitinganation.com and all our other simulcast outlets. For more information, visit www.ignitinganation.com/events. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking with Blythe Daniel and Dr. Helen McIntosh, mother-daughter, who have written a book together called Mended, Restoring the Hearts of Mothers and Daughters. Helen and Blythe, welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm delighted to talk to you about this. You said this kind of grew out of your own experience and your journey to reconciliation, which was somewhat one-sided.
Yes.
Even after your mother's passing, there was continuation of your reconciliation in your relationship with her, which sounds like, well, how can I have that? But we have actually seen that biblically with King David and Asaph. He mourned his death so much that his men came to him and said, you make it sound as if you wish we would have died and he would have lived. And there's things that go on in our mind, will, and emotions after someone passes as we begin to sort through what we're going to do, what the canvas is going to look like that we leave as the legacy of their life in our lives, how we paint that and how we present that. But you also alluded to the fact that you have encountered other women who have had fractured relationships, mother-daughter relationships, and the pain that you've seen and the joy that you've been able to witness when you even introduce the concept that there can be reconciliation. How was this project birthed between the two of you?
Well, we knew that we had a great relationship. And so a couple of years ago, Blythe said, Mom, why don't we write a book about our good relationship? And I said, well, I'm glad you feel that way, but I would feel better about including help and hope for those that do not have a good relationship. And if we can do that, we'll write this book. And then why don't you share part two?
Yes, so we started putting together our book chapters, and a publisher actually contacted us and said, we're looking for a resource for mothers and daughters, and we want to be able to equip them, and if you have anything that you hear about, would you let us know? So I let them know about what we were working on, and they were enthusiastic about it because a mother and daughter team were working on it. Mm-hmm. And as you've alluded to, Eric, our culture has really, I think, misrepresented to women what moms can be and what their relationship can look like between moms and daughters or moms and sons as you grew up, Eric. And so because the mothering role has been splintered in our society, some women have abandoned their role. It grieves me to hear women who leave their children, and some have abandoned emotionally. Yeah. So they're there still, but they're not offering their heart. They're not offering any type of a relationship. And so we want to just help women understand it's not their fault, that they didn't cause this. For the most part, women have taken on a different role. They want to become, maybe successful, or they want to pursue a different relationship, and they can't continue the life that they have with their child. And so it feels personal, but we really want women to know that they are loved by God. They are created in His image. And there is hope for their heart, whether, like you say, Eric, whether it's just one-sided, that they can be restored to that person just through their own efforts, or that there is possibility of how to walk successfully towards restoration. And that's what we wanted to do in our book, Mended.
Eric, I used to stand in front of, during the difficult years with Mom, I would stand in front of the Hallmark section of the Walgreens and stare at all the happy little Mother's Day cards and just weep. Because I just was like, well, I must be the only one that's having a difficult time because it looks so generically wonderful as a day. But my heart is broken for so many out there who've not had that experience. But because of the Lord, He can restore your heart, that you don't have to be so broken. We take Him to broken pieces, but He longs to do repair and restoration.
Helen, are you finding that this is more that the need or the awareness of the breach in this relationship is being more driven by the daughters than it is the mothers, because if the mother admits or confesses or acknowledges in some way that they were not the greatest mother, or that they allowed their anger, their circumstance, their addictions, their problems to, is there a pride factor involved that is almost a block for mothers to initiate this, but daughters may be more of the initiator? You've been in this business of counseling
Yes.
women. Where are you finding, is there an equal balance, or is it as unbalanced as I might think it would be?
I think both ends are needy. You know, Eric, for years I was a school counselor for small children who bore all those wounds and then began acting out. And so, it's almost circular in that I'm not sure, whoever starts the dysfunction, it does go to the next generation and circles around again. So the whole family needs help, really.
They do. They absolutely do. Blythe, did you find in this project that you were made aware of some things that you didn't really realize, that you harbored certain feelings? Were there, it's interesting. You go to a doctor and you say, "Doctor, I have a pain," and so what's the general area? Well, it's like my lower right-hand side of my abdomen. So they begin to push around looking for it, and they come to a spot and they say, "Does that hurt?" You go, "No." "Does that hurt?" "No." "Does that hurt?" And you yell, "Ouch!" And they automatically push it a second time. And it almost angers you, like, "Did you not pay attention?" And I said it hurt. But the point of what he's doing is, first he has to identify where the hurt is. Now he's looking for the source. And as I counseled, I would tell people that when you feel hurt by something, that if you'll just take a moment and ask yourself, why did that hurt, as opposed to the lashing out because it hurt, if you would just press the second time to begin to look at the source, you might just find that the source is within you, and it's a point of unforgiveness or a point of brokenness within you that has nothing to do with them. They were just pushing around trying to help you find out what the cause of the hurt is. They did not do it intentionally. So Blythe, in working with this project for your mother, were there some things that came to the surface for you that you had to apply that became very practical and made its way into the book because it was healing for you with your own mother?
That's a great thought, because one of the things that we talk about in the book and that we really, really have wanted to do in our lives is to take responsibility for what's inside of our heart. Because those things come out, as you know. I mean, we say things, I've said things to my children that I didn't mean, but they came out of a source of frustration. So I practically have lived this. I think what came to the surface when Mom and I were writing this book, and I will say, is my sadness of my mom's relationship with her grandmother. I mean, I knew a lot of the things, but I didn't know some of the things, some of the stories that Mom shared in the book. I didn't know about their last exchange of words with each other when she was in the hospital, nearing the end of her life. I didn't know that story. And so what it caused for me was a sadness that came to the surface. And I thought, I hope and pray that I never say these things to my children. And so it caused me to have some introspection of, I need to make sure that I'm communicating acceptance, and that at times when my kids come to me with something that they've created, or with a question, or with the sadness in their hearts, that I don't dismiss them out of busyness or out of my priorities being in a different place. So it did cause me some awareness of, I want to make sure that I don't put my children through what my mom has lived through and what I lived through in watching my mom's difficulty. And of course, there's things that I learned that I want to be better about, that my mom has really instructed me in, just through her great examples of life. But yes, I did say it did bring up some things that we hadn't maybe even expected.
The conversation starters that you have in the book Give us maybe an example or two of how you can begin to lay a foundation of communication that didn't exist before, that changing the dynamic. It's almost the, I remember as a kid being in the car, and the further away from the radio station you got, you had to turn the dial in order to kind
Right.
of tune it in, and you kind of chase the station until it got out of range. You know, how do you turn that dial and dial it back from the volatility that was the foundation of your communication before? How do you ratchet that back and take it to a new starting point? How do you begin?
You know, I bet you're familiar with this term, Eric, and it's called immediacy. You're speaking of the things right at hand. And so an honest starting point is well received. And it would sound something like this. You know, we are not in the place in our relationship where we probably wish that we could be. But if you will, I'd like to ask you what you think it might take, or what you think is an idea of a way for us to start better. And it's stating how things are, but you're inviting them to give feedback. And so that's one of our little sentences. But immediacy, being so honest about where you are. Another one is, I'm not sure what to say, but I know that my heart longs to be restored to you. What do you think we need to do to make things better? So those are the kinds of sentences we've given, but it starts off in an honest place.
Is this an opportunity for mentoring? Is this an opportunity for counseling? Is this an opportunity where you both kind of get to the point where can we acknowledge that there's a breach in our relationship, but we don't know exactly what to do to heal it? And would you go with me to talk to somebody, or would you? Are you willing to do that, or you take the initiative yourself to go seek out counseling and say, I've read this book and I'd like to apply this, but I don't think my mother's approachable. I don't think that I could even start a conversation with her. She's just completely
too difficult.
Too difficult. You know, I have this amazing relationship with my mother. She's hilarious. She's 93. She has a boyfriend. She goes out dancing. She plays golf 3 times a week.
What a character.
Yeah, she's really a character, and that's what was sustaining for me, was the fact that my father traveled and he was gone for long periods of time, but her sense of humor was what was really the backbone of survival for both of us, for her in the marriage and for me growing up with this very, very structured and difficult environment in the 50s, where we were a new generation. This was a new country. This was not pre-communist Hungary. This was America, the land of the free, the home of it. And you want me to be an American, but you don't want me to do the things American kids do. It's just such a counter message.
Well,
are you finding
wonderful things for the menu to follow, the initial reaching out, and those are all really good ideas, Eric. And we want to say that it doesn't have to be spoken. In other words, the sentence that says, I want us to be restored. What do you think we need to do to make things better? That can be written. It could be an email or an old-fashioned letter. It could be a telephone call. So those are ideas also.
And I think you're right in that there's an importance of taking that initiative ourselves to go to a counselor and say, this is what I'm processing. Can you help me get to a place where I am taking some steps that no matter if my mother or daughter receives me, I'm still going to be okay. I've mended my heart through the Lord doing that with me and for me. Or doing this as a step one with your mother or daughter. And if they're not responsive, to then take it further to a counselor who's trained to be able to help ask questions of you and give you some feedback. So we do see the book being a step one And some women have read it and have said, I'm going to read it first and see what I can glean from it, and then share with my mom the things that would be appropriate through it as well.
The scriptures, the foundation of faith, if I don't have that relationship, if I've not ever experienced the grace and the mercy of God myself, knowing that I was born a sinner, I lived, listen, in my life, I think I was employee of the month for Satan for maybe 2 or 3 years running. I had my own parking space in the kingdom of hell. My name was placed right there until I personally met the Messiah at age 44 in a synagogue. So, you know, my story is really quite unique as a Jewish person growing up and having this encounter with grace and mercy and restoration, and understanding that forgiveness is your response, not how are you going to get back, how do you get even, how do you, the eye for the eye, the tooth for the tooth, all these things. And I became very uncomfortable in the corporate world because the corporate model is almost antithetical to the Bible. And so I became uncomfortable in how I had to treat people in business to get ahead. It just wasn't comfortable for me. But what I noticed was that we kind of become set in our ways. We're people who like patterns, and the dynamics we find even comfort and pain. A long time ago, if you remember Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, they asked him, does he ever, is he ever bothered by anything? Does he ever get, he was the power of positive thinking. Everything was right, everything was good. He was just positive about everything. And they said to him, and the example he gave, he said, when you go to the dentist and they drill a hole in your tooth, he said, the dentist always gets up and walks away. And you're sitting there in the chair, and there's a hole in your tooth. And you take your tongue and you put your tongue in the hole in that tooth. And every single person does that. And he said, and what I've decided is that you will do that until it no longer feels good to do it. And that's when you'll stop. He said, and that's the way life is that we will continue to do things until it no longer feels good to do it, and we'll stop. But there are things in the area of pain where we become comfortable with dysfunction. We become comfortable, and the idea of change becomes fearful. And what you're talking about is building a bridge that is it's a two-way bridge. It's not a one-way street. It's a two-way bridge for an open line so that you can actually be on opposite sides of the bridge and find a way to move towards each other. This isn't a panacea. This isn't a instant. This is a building process, and it's kind of like weight loss and other things. Look, you didn't gain the 40 pounds overnight. You're not going to lose them overnight. It's a process you have to go through. But you lay out such a carefully crafted process that I think that what I found about in reading it was that it's not difficult. These are simple concepts, almost to the point where they're obvious, but we don't know about them. We just never even heard of them. Things like nurturing. My mother didn't grow up in a nurturing world, so she didn't know much about nurturing. When my sister was pregnant, she went to a nurturing class, and I asked my mother what the class was about. She said, I don't know. I didn't understand the concept. And so,
she had fun instead.
Right, exactly. So this is a process for mending, but it's not compromise, it's not modify. Yeah. I'm trying to think of what it is. I think it's more transformational.
We'd like to think that it is. Yes, we resist change as humans. We resist it with all of our might. But God has given some simple ideas to help us mend from the inside out.
And I think that when we know that the way things are now, it's not working, it's not getting better on its own. And so being willing to take a first step and to say, you know what, I don't have anything to lose. I certainly have a lot I can gain. I think that's where we're encouraging people to think differently and to do things differently, because there could be a lot ahead of you that you don't even know about exist. Even my mom and I have experienced a greater depth, a greater love for each other through this past couple of years of her walking through some health journeys that we didn't expect. And God has given us more for each other than we could have expected. So sometimes the hard things, taking that first step is hard, but there can be a richness found in doing hard things together.
What question do I need to ask myself in order to determine what's the barometer for measuring whether or not I have a healthy or unhealthy dynamic in my relationship with a parent?
I think the question to ask is, is what we're doing between us helping draw us closer together or further apart? Because we can measure our relationships and how we feel, how we perceive the other person. And so just asking myself honestly, is what I'm doing helping us come closer together, or is this driving us apart? And being able to identify those things. Maybe it's my tone of voice. Maybe it's that I'm short with this person, or I'm not really paying attention and listening if they try and talk to me. Or maybe it's that anytime they start talking to me, I just shut down. And I don't give them an honest chance to share their heart. We meet mothers and daughters who are like, I don't know what to say because my daughter or my mom just cuts me off. And so there's some self-processing that needs to happen. But like you said, Eric, it's not complicated. It's not this, process that you have to take 10 steps. There's just even one step of just even, like you said, asking, where do I need to pay attention to how I'm feeling about this person in my life?
Right. The discomfort.
Yeah, the discomfort.
Is the ultimate goal total reconciliation, or is it an improvement? Is this to be measured by small steps, measured by small improvements and moving step by step closer? And because of age and time and distance, you may not arrive at this point in this lifetime, but Helen, you've made it apparent that the process continues even after.
Right. I think we can, I think the goal is for us personally to be okay no matter what, to first be restored. But then with the relationship issues, I think after we've had some time with the Lord and taken this before Him, be willing to take some steps to repair any breaches that He directs us. And once we know we've done all that we can do, that's all we can do. I love Ephesians 6:13, having done all to stand. And that's what we can stand on.
Well, this is great wisdom contained in the page of this new book, Mended, Restoring the Hearts of Mothers and Daughters by Mother-Daughter Team Blythe Daniel and Helen McIntosh. Imagine the words of Jesus, who said that if you cannot forgive your brother, my Father in heaven cannot forgive you. That applies to your mother, too.
Yes, yes.
And children to their mothers and mothers to their daughters. The act of forgiveness, the simple act of forgiveness to those closest to you, is sometimes the hardest because they're the ones closest to you. And it seems that the closer you are, that old statement, you only hurt the ones you love, well, that's a sad commentary, but it's a true commentary. And if you're at that point where you're just no longer satisfied with the status quo of living in the dysfunction, and there's no fun in your dysfunction, and you want to see healing take place in this lifetime, at least begin the process in this lifetime, then this is a resource that you want to get a hold of and read and digest for yourself and take the first step towards reconciliation. You'll find not only will your reconciliation process begin with your mother or your daughter, but it's also going to be a tremendous step in your relationship with the Lord when you understand what He has forgiven. For those of us that cannot forgive have forgotten what we have been forgiven of. Blythe
Yes.
Daniel, Dr. Helen McIntosh, thank you for sharing this incredible story with us here on Revealing the Truth.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eric.
All right, God bless you. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.